This video was made with support from the National Lottery Heritage Fund. Screened by a copse of ancient trees, Weelsby Hall in Grimsby is a hidden gem of significant social, architectural and cultural interest in North East Lincolnshire. The hall was commissioned in 1890 as the family home of Sir George Frederick Slight, 1st Baronet of Weelsby, reflecting his wealth and status in society.
He started out his business empire as a youth. He'd have a donkey cart and he'd go down to Cleethorpes foreshore and he would collect cockles. So he'd then take them on a donkey cart to Grimsby and sell them. And that's how he started his empire.
It was the beginning of a business empire that would eventually see George own the biggest fleet of fishing trawlers in the world.
He ended up with a smokehouse, engineering works, shipbuilding premises. And then he decided he needed a country seat, and so in 1890 he then bought some land off Edward Heneage, and that became what is known as a campus now. He had 5 daughters and 4 sons that lived here with his wife. And the ground floor plan shows a drawing room, and the drawing room has beautiful painted flower garlands around the walls and ceiling, and they were done by a travelling Italian artist. And then there's the dining room, the sitting room, and then we've got the billiard room as well, and the marvellous hall with a galleried landing. Every room had a fireplace. Each one is different, the tiles are different, and some of them are beautiful tiles, and on the whole they're pretty well intact.
When the last of the Slight family departed, several uses were considered for the hall in the 1970s. Some tried, but by 1980 the hall had fallen into disuse and disrepair. On the Heritage Channel tonight, the history of local cinema with John Williamson, a tourist trail in Cleethorpes with Emma Lingard, and historic buildings finding a new purpose in the 21st century. Welcome to the Heritage Channel on Clee TV, where we explore the fascinating history of North East Lincolnshire in a monthly roundup of news, views and local stories. Thanks to support from the Heritage Starter Fund, plans are now underway to restore and repurpose this magnificent building to benefit the most vulnerable in our society. In 1971, a group of educationalists recognising the lack of post-16 education for young people with learning disabilities began to consider how this could be provided.
Well, I think that we were all working with young people, particularly those with special needs at the time. We recognised that at school leaving age there was no extra provision for them. So we wanted to provide a period of 2 years at least further education.
And subsequently in about 76 we registered that group as a charity. We opened our first college at Toyton Hall near Spilsby in April 1979.
And we could see that it would provide somewhere where these young people could learn to be independent and gain work skills, social skills, and the skills you need to make friends and live independently. It was a tremendous need. Within 2 years we had a 2-year waiting list, By the time it was 3 years, we had a 3-year waiting list for places. So we had to open another development, which led to the development of Weelsby Hall.
We became aware of this property, and when we visited, we saw its potential, especially its grounds, which were consistent with those the environment that we have at Toyton Hall.
The Weelsby Hall campus was first opened in 1982 and expanded in 1986 to give learners the experience of a hall of residence, where they were encouraged and supported to gain extensive independent skills. Weelsby Hall and grounds play an important role in linkage's commitment to valuing and supporting individuals, their carers and families to help them achieve their aspirations.
I think having the right environment for people to succeed in is hugely important. So when you come here to Weelsby, not only do you see the magnificent historic building, the grounds and the environment, the being at one with nature.
The trees, which are amazing, and the sense of calm that you get being here.
It's welcoming, it's safe, it's large.
It's lovely, it's a privilege to be in a building like the hall. It's a privilege to have such lovely setting.
The grounds especially create an atmosphere where we can take part in a lot of activities in a safe environment, especially due to the pandemic and not being able to go out and about as such.
They do, they have a great time. Yeah. They do. And they look forward to it, they really do.
I come here because the activities and boxing. That was amazing.
Weelsby Hall is a part of linkage. Yeah, it really is. It's a huge asset, and being the grand building that it is.
In recent years, the continued deterioration of the buildings, issues of accessibility and changes in provision meant that much of the hall and outbuildings were no longer fit for purpose, and options were considered for the future of the site.
The biggest problem is access. We have 5 steps at the front and we only have 1 ramp fire escape at the back. And a lot of the parts that we use do leak.
The historic buildings really aren't fit for purpose and can't really be used in the way that they used to be. So the outbuildings are barely used, they're used just for storage, and the main hall, the upper floor, can't be used for fire safety reasons. They're not being used productively, they're draining cash from linkage who can't fund the maintenance requirements of these buildings. So as a result of that, we applied for some funding to carry out an options appraisal from the National Lottery Heritage Fund. Out of that came a proposal for the former outbuildings to be used for a residential facility for clients that linkage currently aren't able to support. So this is people with increasingly complex needs. And then for the hall itself, the plans for that area are to move staff into the upper floor, reinstate the original rooms, the room layouts, which are still full of fireplaces and original coving, and it's wonderful up there. And then downstairs to focus on care training, because this is an area that linkage have identified is a need in the area. Another area that linkage would like to include as part of the future project is greater public access to the hall and the grounds. We've had a couple of heritage open days where members of the public have been able to come and tour the hall and the grounds, and people have been astonished at this hidden gem behind the trees. And I think there's a sense that through this project we can share with the public more of the hall's history.
With charitable aims and practical plans for its future, Linkage are the safe custodians of this hidden gem in the heart of the local community, a significant part of the heritage of North East Lincolnshire.
We need to apply for funding to be able to safeguard the heritage of the hall for the future, whilst enabling Linkage to carry on delivering and expand its services.
I think it's our legacy as a place. I think people need to attach to the past whilst embracing the future. We have some amazing buildings in this borough. Grimsby has a deep history, and we should do our best to celebrate that history and preserve it.
It's at the heart of Linkage. It holds so many important statements about what Linkage represents, and it's about creating environments that are conducive to people's development and happiness in the end.
It's part of Grimsby's history and heritage, and we don't feel that should be lost. We need to protect it.
Grimsby-based community organisation Our Big Picture are committed to supporting the regeneration of North East Lincolnshire through arts and heritage projects. Thanks to support from the National Lottery Heritage Fund, they now have a new centre to expand and develop their activities from a historic building within the curtilage of Grimsby Minster.
So the building dates from 1700. So it's 300 years old. We have documentation that places it in 1727 on the purchase of it by William Elwood. He buys the building with John Hannah. John Hannah actually dies, and so it is under the William Elwood's family, and it stays in the family until the 1950s. So it's only had two families, where the Cantors buy part of most of it. Pre-1700, it does talk about cottages and dwellings that were here. We believe this is definitely part of the old medieval Grimsby. We're on right next to the church. It would have made search. You always had like a marketplace. That's what it's called, the old marketplace. And a marketplace by a church. So this place has been occupied, potentially could have been occupied from Roman times. So we are going to be doing an archaeological dig in July. We're hoping to find at least medieval in the pit that we're going to dig, and we may get down to Roman, but we'll see. So the plans for the building is very much being led by the people we're meeting. So on the heritage side, we've got the Architectural Heritage Fund and the Heritage Lottery people, but also we've got the Civic Society, we've got the Archaeological and Heritage Society. So we're building some of these societies and their needs into this. So there's some very interesting conversations around that as well. We've got our young people that we're working with from our Imaginarium. We've got young artists coming through, young producers coming through. We're building collaborations. It's really given us that space to be able to try things and test things. So we've got an exhibition at the moment called Retrospective. It's 5 artists, local artists, and we've selected them, so we've got a collective little group in number 21, and then we've got 2 artists in number 17 and 19. And we've got a residence area, so it's going to be residency. So we've got like an Airbnb, if you like, but for artists. That's been developed and that'll be open hopefully in the new year once we get all the building regs done. Lots of things that we've got streams of running at the moment, as well as making sure that Our Big Picture is going to be sustainable and also can keep going through the future. We've got a lot of challenges, but everybody's so passionate about it and driven about it. I'm really excited, and it's very supportive funders, the council, Grimsby Creates team, Grimsby Sparks, all of that has been, invaluable to us.
No day is the same.
Every day is very different, always different challenges to me, and learning lots along the way.
Sometimes you feel as though every day is the same, but it's not. Every day is a different challenge.
1 minute they don't know who you are, and just that little smile when they recognise you or they recognise a song, it just brings tears to your eyes, And to know that at the end of the day you have helped them to live the day as best they can.
Coming up on tonight's show, Heritage Lincolnshire News and the Cleethorpes Tourist Trail with Emma Lingard. But first, our correspondent and keen cinema goer John Williamson is joined by fellow enthusiast Mark Cady-Gell, storyteller David Wrighton and projectionist Pete Blanchard to explore the history of movie magic in local cinemas of all shapes and sizes.
We all love a trip out to see the latest blockbuster. I certainly do. Now, this area has a rich history in cinema, but before we look at ours, let's go back to the late 19th century and see how public cinema in the UK began. The picture house that is widely recognised as the birthplace of cinema in the UK is in Regent Street, London. The building was purpose-built for optical exhibitions and was added on to the Royal Polytechnic in 1848. It was in 1896 that cinema was born in the UK, when the building hosted a demonstration to the press of the French Lumiere brothers' cinematograph machine. Now, their invention was a camera that could record, develop and project film. The demonstration included now world-famous footage of factory workers leaving their factory and the arrival of a train. The Pathé Cinema Journal reported that the Polytechnic had identified the potential of the machine, stating that when the invention was still in an infant stage, the Polytechnic gave it a home, realising at once its vast possibilities as an educational instrument and as a means of public entertainment. Now, the Grimsby and Cleethorpes area has over the years had many cinemas, and they've been known by different names as ownership has changed, and there were loads of them.
There certainly seems to be. At one point we must have had 13, 14 plus. I'm not sure of the numbers, but there was a lot of cinemas. The most common ones were the Ritz and the Regal, which is the previous name of the ABC. They were the ones down Grimsby Road and down Freeman Street. But just round the corner from the one down Freeman Street, there was the Tivoli, but that was bombed during the war. There was also the Tower, which is now it was a car rental place. I think it's a Printers now. And around the corner, you've got what is now the Caxton Theatre. That was also a cinema. There was many cinemas. There was a few in town as well. We had the Savoy, which is now McDonald's. There was others around there. There was the Chantry down Chantry Lane, and the Globe down where Dunelm is now, and many more.
Some of our cinemas had dual roles, both as cinemas and as theatres. And some very big names came to town.
And while Malcolm and Wise were there, we were I was working down on the stage doing something or other, and one of the lads happened to say to me, "What time are we going today?" You see, and I said, "Oh, I think it starts about 2:00." So, and Eric Morecambe says, "Where are you going?" So I said, "We're going to the Queen's to see The Robe, the first CinemaScope picture." "Oh," he says, "where's that?" So I said, well, I was trying to tell him where it was. He said, "Can we come with you?" You see, so I said, "Yeah, of course." I said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, right, we'll meet outside the cinema and we'll go in Eric Morecambe's car." You see, so I said, "Well, we get passes to go to different cinemas, and it's a thing that everybody, changes passes at cinemas." So I said, "Do you want me to get a staff pass from the manager, you see, for you both?" "Yeah. Oh, yeah," he said, "yeah." So there we toddles off to the Queen's, and we were sat in the circle there, and Eric Morecambe bought the ice creams, and we all had a nice day,
In one of my jobs, I had access to the building, and I went round, and it was in a sorry state of repair. At that point, there was a big issue. A lot of people understand Grimsby's built on marshland in a lot of places. The interesting part about that is the cinema used to flood on the ground level, and there was a permanent pump in place to keep the water out. Problem was, and this is one of the reasons why the restart that tried to happen in the 2000s failed very quickly, was the place is damp. And after they closed it, when it closed its doors as the ABC full stop, or I think it was Odeon at that point, they turned the pumps off. So what that meant was the basement flooded with water, so you couldn't even get into it, which meant the whole place was damp. And that was a common thread in that building, but while it was open, the pumps were on 24/7, so it never flooded. But when I was in there, the floors were wet, there was water dripping off the ceiling, all the walls were, literally as I said, all the walls were damp, and you could see all the wet patches, and it wasn't a very nice looking building at all.
My mother, Ivy, worked at the Regal Cinema in Freeman Street. Freeman Street was the centre of the town then, and she used to be on night duty during the war, etc. And they didn't stop the film when there was an air raid. Usually they put a notice on the screen saying there is an air raid in progress, and people could leave and go to the public air raid shelter, which is situated where Freeman Street Market is now. And this one particular night, my mother heard the air raid siren go off, so she pressed the button and a little light flashed on in the projection room, and the projectionist put a notice on the screen, an air raid is in progress. And some people left, and some people just moved under the balcony to watch the rest of the film, which is what they advised you to do in case the roof came down. And there was a terrible air raid that night, and a bomb had obviously landed very close. The whole building shook, it terrified everyone inside, and it was later discovered that those that had left and gone in the public air raid shelter had been killed because the public air raid shelter received a direct hit, and those people left sitting in the cinema survived.
Well, that's a brief history of cinemas in our area. Now, audiences are on the increase again, but I fear they'll never reach the dizzy heights of post-war Britain. Now, the Parkway here has held film premieres in recent months, and the Parkway is where I'm going now to see the latest Spielberg blockbuster.
News now, and Heritage Lincolnshire have a new CEO starting in March. Tracy Stringfellow says she is excited to be returning to her home county in the spring and to a charity at the forefront of championing Lincolnshire's rich and diverse heritage. The second in the series of talks, Richard III from Birth to Bosworth, delivered by historian Matt Lewis, is on the 28th of February. Book now on the Heritage Lincolnshire website. My Fish GY is a large-scale community creative project that has engaged the local community in a digital creative collaboration inspired by our fishing heritage. Grimsby fish created by local residents will swim in a virtual sea projected onto various iconic public buildings across the town from the 17th of February. There's no shortage of historic buildings in the seaside town of Cleethorpes, as we discover from historian and broadcaster Emma Lingard as she takes us on the tourist trail.
Did you know Cleethorpes began as 3 separate hamlets, Oul, Itterby and Thrumsco. They became known as Cleethorpes, the villages of Old Clee, which was where the parish church was. It wasn't until 1863, with the arrival of the railway, that Cleethorpes as a resort as we know it today came to life. And here, the pier gardens, the pier behind us, are the monuments of the railway industry, because they created these pleasure areas for all the visitors that came. Castle, named after Edward Ross, secretary to the Manchester, Sheffield and Lincolnshire Railway Company, who formed the resort of Cleethorpes. It's said to denote the height of the cliffs. Of course, Cleethorpes, with its 3 hamlets, was predominantly very rural. The main occupations in Cleethorpes were farming and fishing, so the fishermen would take their boats down the cliffside onto the beach and out into the North Sea. So Cleethorpes was the home of fishing well before Grimsby became the premier fishing port in the world. Seaview Street is very attractive to the tourists, always has been. In fact, number 16 Seaview Street is said to be one of the oldest shops in the road, opening in the 1800s to accommodate the growing boom in tourism. Sadly, a cholera epidemic broke out in the nearby houses in the 1850s, which frightened many tourists away. But as you can see today, Seaview Street is a thriving street that attracts many people from far and wide. House was built in 1898 and it's Grade 2 listed. It was lived in by Henry Kelly Sr. and his family. Henry, as well as being a greengrocer, an alderman and a justice of the peace, was also director of the Great Grimsby Steam Trawling Company. And Henry, like so many trawler owners of the time, moved to Cleethorpes for the fresh air. But also, Knoll House gave him the superb views of the Humber estuary, so Henry could see his trawlers coming home. Did you know people born in Cleethorpes are referred to as Meggies, and there are a number of reasons why this is so. One is that there was a smuggler called Meg who was famous when a ship crashed ashore here, landing a cargo of red cotton in which all the women and children of Cleethorpes walked around in red flannel drawers. The second is the area around Isaac's Hill in Old English was called Mag Helland, corrupted to Meg's Island.
Well, that's all from the Heritage Channel for tonight. If you're watching on Facebook, don't forget to join our group, or on YouTube, click the subscribe button below to make sure you don't miss any of our programmes. From Alex, Ellis, Gemma, Hugh, John, Kirsty and all the team at the Heritage Channel, thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you next month for more heritage news, views and local stories, including how best-selling author Tracy Baines finds inspiration from her childhood in Cleethorpes.